Model allies that step up, like Israel, South Korea, will receive our special favor. Allies that do not, allies that still fail to do their part for collective defense, will face consequences. President Trump, makes sense to me, likes helping countries that help themselves. And we feel the same way.
미국 국방장관이 수많은 선진국들을 제쳐두고 오직 한국만 콕 집어서 특별 대우를 하겠다고 발표했습니다.
Real partnerships and alliances based on hard power, not just flags and fancy conferences based on theories and hot rhetoric. Our allies are not children. They're nations capable of doing far more for themselves than they have. It's time they stand up, and they are. In fact, many of them are nations who have proud and powerful martial traditions of their own, and we should treat them that way. We can and should and must expect them to do their part exactly as President Trump has.
거칠애로 하는 말이 아니라 진심이 담긴 극찬이었죠. 콧대 높은 미국의 국방장관이 이렇게 대놓고 한국의 국방력을 칭찬한 진짜 이유는 무엇일까요?
At the same time, in diplomacy and defense, they swore off the clear-eyed, flexible realism of Reagan, Nixon, and Eisenhower. Instead, they set about trying to make America the policeman, the protector, the arbiter of the whole world. Democracy for all, they say, even in the Pesh River Valley. Even when people don't want it, can't do it. They turned American allies into dependents, all but encouraging these nations across Europe and around the world to free ride while we subsidize their defense with U.S. taxpayer dollars. These self-described neo-Reaganites sought global military hegemony under the auspices of peace through strength. Instead, we got rudderless wars in the Middle East, land war in Europe, and the economic rise of China. After presiding over such a poor performance, it's remarkable that these people still think they're qualified to speak in public, let alone moralize to the rest of us. Some of them have even been awarded for it on this very stage. But President Trump knows better. He knows what it means to restore peace through strength on an enduring basis, to put our nation's interests first and the American people first in a way that is practical, applicable, and common sense, that leaves, importantly, America better, but also leaves our allies better off. It's the vision that he ran on and led on in his first term, and he's building on it now in his second. It's a vision, not the quasi-imperialist delusions that led us to so many disasters in the recent decades, that will actually bring us back to the true legacy of Ronald Reagan. Out with utopian idealism, in with hard-nosed realism. Just look at the facts. Like President Reagan, President Trump is dedicated to both sides of the peace through strength coin. Not just using that phrase as a thin veil for warmongering.
그동안 많은 선진국들은 군사비를 줄이고 미국의 보호망 아래서 편하게 지냈습니다. 하지만 그 오랜 시간 동안 미국에만 기대지 않고 홀로 버틴 나라가 있었습니다. 바로 한국입니다. 남들이 군대를 줄이고 무기를 안 만들 때 우리는 묵묵히 스스로를 지킬 힘을 키워왔던 거죠.
Like President Reagan, President Trump is willing to talk to rivals. From Mikhail Gorbachev to Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping today. This is born of strength, not weakness. It is born of clarity of purpose. Folks in Washington like to criticize President Trump for doing so, but those critics forget that this is exactly what Ronald Reagan did. And America was better off for it. Like President Reagan, President Trump also knows how important it is to negotiate from a position of strength, especially military strength. And at the newly renamed Department of War, thanks to President Trump's leadership and to Congress, we received a historic boost in funding last year and believe that is only just the beginning. Make no mistake about it, President Trump is hell-bent on maintaining and accelerating the most powerful military the world has ever seen. The most powerful, the most lethal, and American-made. The arsenal of freedom. We're also restoring the warrior ethos back to basics, readiness, accountability, standards, discipline, lethality.
확실한 힘이 있어야만 평화를 지킬 수 있다. 미국이 이제야 다시 강조하고 있는 이 원칙은 사실 대한민국이 지난 70년 동안 하루도 빠짐없이 증명해 온 우리만의 생존 방식이었습니다. 남들이 잊고 있던 당연한 사실을 우리는 이미 나라의 기본으로 삼고 있었던 셈입니다.
Of disastrous decisions by this nation's self-appointed so-called foreign policy elite, we're once again putting American interests first. We're prioritizing our nation's security, freedom, and prosperity, our citizens. As laid out by President Trump, we're doing it in a way that leaves not only our nation better off, but also the world. Out with utopian idealism, in with hard-nosed realism. The president's approach is one of that flexible but practical realism, common sense, if you will, that looks at the world with a clear-eyed perspective, essential for serving America's real interests. The approach is informed by strategic rationality and cost-benefit assessments. We will define our vital interests in ways that are reasonable and that make sense to ordinary Americans. This is the approach and mindset that shapes the department's focus. As a result, the War Department will not be distracted by democracy-building interventionism, undefined wars, regime change, climate change, woke moralizing, and feckless nation-building. We will instead put our nation's practical, concrete interests first. We will deter war. We will advance our interests. We will defend our people. Peace is our goal. And in service of that objective, we will always be ready to fight and win decisively if called upon. As part of this mission, we are asking American taxpayers to fund the world's greatest military. We're asking mothers and fathers across America to trust us with their most precious resource, their sons and daughters. And we will honor their trust and their sacrifice. The historic recruiting and retention numbers of President Trump's first year show who the American people trust. This means we will not send America's best to advance foolhardy or reckless adventures halfway around the world. It also means not asking them to pick up the tab for allies who should fund their own defense. Instead, and above all, it means that we only ask our warriors to fight for things that make America and Americans safe, free, and prosperous. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nothing more and nothing less. Again, this is common sense, and that's what President Trump's War Department is all about. This common sense approach means prioritizing 4 key lines of effort at the Department of War. First, defending the U.S. homeland and our hemisphere. Second, deterring China through strength, not confrontation. Third, increased burden sharing for U.S. allies and partners. And fourth, supercharging the U.S. defense industrial base.
이제 미국만 믿고 국방을 소홀히 하던 나라들에게는 비상이 걸렸습니다. 하지만 한국은 전혀 당황할 필요가 없습니다. 우리는 애초에 남에게 나라의 안전을 맡긴 적이 없기 때문입니다. 우리 스스로의 피와 땀으로 강한 군사력을 만들어낸 한국의 모습이 오히려 전 세계가 배워야 할 정답으로 떠오르고 있습니다.
President Trump's approach to flexible realism, the first 2 lines of effort are the primary operational focus of the joint force, for the simple reason that these missions matter the most for safety, freedom, and prosperity of Americans. At the same time, however, other threats persist around the world, including in Europe and the Middle East. We cannot ignore them, nor should we. That's why our approach also prioritizes burden sharing and burden shifting. Indeed, for the first time since Reagan's era, allied and partner burden sharing is no longer an afterthought or a nice to have. Today is a core element of our national defense. And finally, the 4th line of effort, maybe the most important, supercharging America's defense industrial base, underwrites everything else. Last month, I gave another speech in Washington, this time to defense industry leaders, to announce a department-wide, not reform, a transformation of requirements, acquisitions, and foreign military sales. Our objective is simple if monumental. Transform the entire acquisition system to rapidly accelerate the fielding of capabilities and focus on results. The bottom line is a historic, generational, and transformational changes that we will implement and will move us from the current prime contractor-dominated system, defined by limited competition, vendor lock, cost-plus contracts, stressed budgets, and frustrating protests, to a future powered by dynamic vendor space that accelerates production by combining investment at a commercial pace with the uniquely American ability to scale and scale quickly, all at the speed of urgency. That speech stands on its own. So I'll spend the balance of my time here talking about the
특히 세계가 놀라는 부분은 바로 한국의 무기 생산 능력입니다. 다른 선진국들조차 공장을 닫아서 포탄 하나 제대로 못 만들 때 한국은 쉬지 않고 최첨단 무기를 개발하며 세계 최고 수준의 방위 산업을 완성했습니다. 우리 땅은 우리가 지키겠다는 굳은 의지가 세계가 부러워하는 군사 강국을 만들어낸 것은 아닐까요?
The second line of effort for the War Department is deterrence against China through strength, not through confrontation. Under President Trump's leadership, relations between the United States and China are better and stronger than they've been in many years. President Trump and this administration seek a stable peace, fair trade, and respectful relations with China. In November, President Trump and President Xi reached a major breakthrough in trade, putting both nations on a strong economic pathway. Reciprocal state visits in 2026 provide the opportunity for even more progress. The War Department is committed to the same approach, opening a wider range of military-to-military communications with the People's Liberation Army, aimed at deconfliction and de-escalation. We laid the groundwork for this with our counterparts months ago at ASEAN in Malaysia, and will continue that work. This line of effort is based on flexible realism, not naivete, an approach aimed not at domination, but rather at a balance of power. A balance of power that will enable all of us, all countries, to enjoy a decent peace in an Indo-Pacific where trade flows openly and fairly, where we can all prosper and all interests are respected. That's the world that we seek in the Indo-Pacific, and that is what our approach is designed to produce. We will be strong, but not unnecessarily confrontational. To quote another great Republican president, we will speak softly and carry a big stick. As I said at Shangri-La earlier this year, we're not trying to strangle China's growth. We're not trying to dominate or humiliate them, nor are we trying to change the status quo over Taiwan. Our interests in the Indo-Pacific are significant, but also scoped and reasonable. This includes the ability for us, along with allies, to be postured strongly enough in the Indo-Pacific to balance China's growing power. This means ensuring none of our allies are vulnerable to sustained, successful military aggression. This is what we mean by deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. Not dominating China, but rather ensuring they do not have the ability to dominate us or our allies. It's common sense.
지금 군사적 긴장감이 가장 높은 아시아 태평양 지역. 여기서 한국의 존재감은 엄청납니다. 함부로 덤빌 수 없는 강한 화력과 수십만 명의 뛰어난 군인들을 항상 유지하고 있는 나라죠. 한국은 강대국 눈치나 보는 약한 나라가 아니라 이 지역의 평화를 든든하게 받쳐주는 핵심 방패 그 자체입니다.
In this vein, our role at the Department of War is essential. It's our job to make sure Beijing sees unquestionable U.S. military strength that, if necessary, can back up our national interests. Even as we make clear our peaceful intentions, we insist that, as a Pacific nation ourselves, China respect our long-standing interests in the Indo-Pacific. And not just insist, but maintain the manifest strength to underwrite it. This involves respecting the historic military buildup they are undertaking. Our department maintains a clear-eyed appreciation of how rapid, formidable, and holistic the military buildup has been. We take these capabilities seriously. It would be silly and frankly disrespectful not to. This approach requires focus, prioritization, and clarity of purpose. That's why we will ensure our military can, if God forbid necessary, project sustained capabilities along the First Island chain and throughout the Indo-Pacific. That means being so strong that aggression is not even considered, and that peace is preferred and preserved. This is deterrence by denial. It is our job to ensure that President Trump is always able to negotiate from a position of strength in order to sustain peace in the Indo-Pacific. This is not a pivot for tomorrow. It is a reality for today.
주변의 위협을 막아내려면 말로만 하는 외교가 아니라 당장 싸워서 이길 수 있는 실제 전투력이 필요합니다. 최첨단 군함부터 우리 손으로 만든 전투기까지 바다와 하늘과 땅을 모두 지키는 대한민국의 국방력은 주변 강대국들조차 함부로 움직이지 못하게 만들고 있습니다.
And finally, our third line of effort is increasing burden sharing with U.S. allies around the world. Here again, many self-ascribed neo-Reaganites seem to have lost the plot. According to them, only the United States has the ability to provide for defense and deterrence in Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. According to them, if the United States doesn't do it, nobody will. In fact, according to some, America is actually better off subsidizing these allies' defenses, even if they're perfectly capable of doing more for themselves and our collective defense. That is, of course, patently ridiculous, not to mention insulting to our allies. It's actually vitally important for America's allies and partners to step up and do their part for our collective defense. This isn't just a matter of doing right by Americans who are rightfully frustrated by years of allied free riding. This is pragmatic. As we rightly prioritize our homeland hemisphere in the Indo-Pacific, threats persist in other regions, and our allies need to step up. And step up for real. Our allies in Europe face Russia. Iran has been set back by the president and Israel's actions, but remains a threat in the Middle East. And of course, North Korea looms on the Korean peninsula.
우리는 언제 도발할지 모르는 가장 위협적인 북한과 마주하고 있습니다. 하지만 한국인들은 단 한 번도 미국이 알아서 다 막아주겠지라고 생각하지 않았습니다. 내 가족과 내 땅은 내 손으로 직접 지킨다는 그 단단한 결심이 우리를 세계 6위의 군사 강국으로 만든 가장 큰 비결입니다.
We must also prepare for the possibility of simultaneous threats in different regions. That doesn't mean we think such simultaneous action is likely or even necessarily inevitable, but it's something the Department of War must be prepared for. And the best way to prepare for this is not by pretending we can do everything or be everywhere, effectively handing a permission slip for our allies' laggardly defense efforts. This neo-Reaganite attitude led us to fritter away our soldiers' lives, our national resources, and our citizens' support in rudderless wars. Our approach is fundamentally different and in keeping with the noble tradition of President Reagan as well as Nixon and Eisenhower. We will actually, for real, get our allies and partners to step up and do their part. We will no longer tolerate free riding. President Trump has shown the way with his historic leadership that yielded the commitments at NATO's Hague Summit. There, NATO committed to spend 5% of GDP on defense, 3.5% on core military, and 1.5% on security-related investments, and pledged to take primary responsibility for Europe's conventional defense. Things most folks sitting here just 5 years ago would have thought completely impossible. We're now using this template to press our allies around the world to meet this new global standard the president has set. And it's working. First, there was Europe and Canada. And just last month, South Korea committed to spend 3.5% of GDP on core military spending and assume the leading role in the ROC's conventional defense. We are optimistic that under other Indo-Pacific allies will follow suit.
국방비 3.5%. 미국 국방장관이 이 숫자를 말하며 놀라워한 건 그저 돈이 많아서가 아닙니다. 다른 나라의 도움 없이도 스스로 나라를 굳건히 지켜내는 한국군의 뛰어난 실력, 그리고 안보를 중요하게 생각하는 우리 국민들에 대한 진심 어린 존경의 표현일 겁니다.
In a few years, thanks to President Trump's visionary leadership, we will have our allies, which include some of the wealthiest and most productive countries in the world, once again fielding combat-credible militaries and boasting revived defense industrial industries. This will form a powerful, shared defensive shield with well-armed allies around the world ready to defend themselves, their interests, and our collective interests.
미국은 이제 모든 동맹국에게 한국처럼 스스로 싸울 힘을 기르라고 요구하고 있습니다. 한때 아시아의 작은 나라였던 우리가 이제는 세계 최강국인 미국이 다른 나라들에게 보여주는 가장 완벽한 롤모델이 된 이 현실 가슴이 벅차오르지 않으십니까?
Was roughly two times more than what the U.S. is spending today. My question to you, Mr. Secretary, should the U.S. be spending more? There are many people in this audience responsible for building, operating, and funding combat systems.
Well, the president has said and continues to say he's committed to rebuilding the military, and that requires spending and substantial spending. People have asked me what keeps me up, and other than the operational aspects of the job, the men and women out there doing the work for us, which of course is top of mind always, it's actually been the budget. It's actually been resources. It's actually been ensuring that our team does all the spade work necessary with the services to make sure we're properly representing what we need to deter and fight and win our nation's wars. That's just this week, and I was with some of you, was there in the Oval having these very discussions about FY26 and FY27. And all I can say today is the president is committed to ensuring that our services, our great companies, our industries have what is needed to what we say and we call rebuilding the arsenal of freedom. We need a revived defense industrial base. We need those capabilities. We need them yesterday. And so resource-wise, I think this room will be encouraged by what we'll see soon, but I don't want to get too ahead of it.
Because at the high mark of President Reagan, we were spending 6% of our GDP on defense. At the low mark of Jimmy Carter's presidency, we were spending 4.5% of GDP, and today it's about 3%. Do you think that number will go up?
I think that number is going up. I don't want to get in front of the president and his desire to properly shape what the budget should look like. But just reading the tea leaves, just watching it, he understands the threat better than anybody I've ever seen articulate and understand the threat, and that includes investment. He just needs to make sure, by the way, if you haven't met our Deputy Secretary, Steve Feinberg, he's the absolute best in the business. He understands how to drive budgets, how to drive change, and he and I, along with the chairman, Dan Kane in the front here, are absolutely shoulder to shoulder in the belief of representing the president exactly what we need to make sure we're at the proper level, and I believe it'll be going up.
Can you take us back to the September 2nd strike off the coast of Venezuela, the very first one when combat operations began?
세계에서 가장 힘센 미국조차 자신들의 국방 시스템을 새로 고쳐야 한다며 쩔쩔매고 있습니다. 이걸 보면 수십 년 동안 흔들림 없이 국방력을 키워오면서 완벽한 무기 생산 능력까지 갖춘 대한민국의 수준이 얼마나 대단한지 다시금 깨닫게 됩니다.
Let's move over to China, who now has the world's largest navy. For every 8 warships they're building each year, the United States is only building 1.8. They're building and modernizing their nuclear forces, building a nuclear triad. They're helping Russia build artillery, 300,000 rounds a month. The U.S. can only muster 40,000 rounds manufacture a month. How concerned are you about these numbers? Chinese shipbuilding is 230% greater than the United States' capability. How worried are you about that?
Well, we're obviously well aware of their historic military buildup. It's right in front of us, which the most important thing we can do is look inward and increase our urgency of ensuring we rebuild our defense industrial base and the arsenal of freedom. I mean, that's why we're crisscrossing the country. That's why we did an entire acquisitions, requirements, and foreign military sales overhaul. Not a reform, not a tinkering. Ask the folks that understand it, our folks that are doing it. This is a complete game change in how we deliver systems to the battlefield. We have to. We don't have time. Ultimately, we need to be able to field the best as quickly as possible. So we see it, we're aware, but we're also prudent in how we approach it, which is the way the president has approached.
힘이 있어야만 살아남는 국제사회, 남에게 지켜달라고 부탁만 하는 나라는 결국 버텨낼 수 없습니다. 미국 국방장관이 전 세계를 향해 한국을 모범 국가라며 특별 대우한 것은 결코 우연이나 불쌍해서 베푸는 친절이 아닙니다. 지난 70년 동안 그 어떤 어려움 속에서도 절대 남에게 나라의 안전을 맡기지 않고 기어코 세계가 인정하는 강한 군사력을 만들어낸 대한민국을 향한 당연한 박수입니다. 남의 전쟁에 끌려가지 않고 오직 우리 땅과 평화를 지켜내는 든든한 힘, 전 세계가 그토록 찾고 있던 정답은 어쩌면 처음부터 우리 안에 있었던 것은 아닐까요? 시청자 여러분들은 오늘 영상을 보며 어떤 생각이 드셨나요? 오늘 영상은 여기까지입니다. 시청해주셔서 감사합니다.